Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to connect with you today to talk about the Secure Sheep and Wool Supply Plan, some of the resources that we have that can help with contingency planning for market disruptions. I'm Danelle Bickett-Weddle from the Center for Food Security and Public Health at Iowa State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. The impact of COVID-19, a completely human disease, on the animal agriculture industry had immediate and long-term impacts due to market disruptions. Today, we're going to focus on a potentially bigger disaster, foot and mouth disease, or FMD, which is an animal disease. Foot and mouth disease is the most contagious viral disease of animals, and it's also the disease that has the most limit when it comes to world trade of animals and their products. You can see pictures here from a foot and mouth disease outbreak in Korea in 2010, the UK in 2001, Egypt in 2012, and Japan in 2010. This disease does not cause major death in animals. It can in young animals, but definitely not in adults. It causes more sickness in adults. But these images you see depict how we respond typically to this highly contagious disease through stamping out or depopulation. It infects cloven-hooved animals, cattle, sheep, pigs, goats. We've not had foot and mouth disease since 1929. It is important to remember that FMD is not a public health or food safety concern. It's an animal disease. Now, what if this animal disease were introduced to the United States? What kind of impact would we be looking at? The United States is considered FMD-free without vaccination, according to the OIE, which is referred to as the World Organization for Animal Health. Just one diagnosis of FMD in the United States will halt exports of susceptible animals and their products: meat, milk, wool, semen, and embryos. The ability to move animals domestically in the United States will depend on how quickly this contagious disease comes under control. Exports, or our access to international markets, may take much longer based on historical outbreak data from other countries. What you see before you is a chart that shows the blue line is the same height for Japan or United Kingdom, and that shows the actual length of the outbreak. The orange line, the first line you see, is what OIE recognized this country as disease-free. And then the gray bars, the second line, shows that it took a little longer, and in some cases a lot longer, for the United States to recognize a certain country as FMD-free. So a lot of times people ask, well, what could be the long-lasting impact? And I point them to the trade discussion. Movement restrictions is one of the control strategies for susceptible livestock to try and contain this disease if we were to get foot and mouth disease. A 72-hour national movement standstill of susceptible species, semen, embryos, and wool has been recommended by USDA during their foot and mouth disease response planning. During this time, regulatory control areas will be set up around infected premises. The infected, suspect, and contact farms will be managed under guidance in the FMD Red Book, as you can see pictured here. That's the response plan. Livestock operations that are affected by the movement controls in that control area, again, the infected premises is at the center of that dot, and the pink and the blue areas is considered the control area. If one of your operations was located within that, but is not infected with the disease, you'll still have movement controls. This is where the guidance from the secure food supply plans come in. How can we prevent exposure while thinking about business continuity plans for milk, sheep and wool, beef cattle, and the swine industry? So the standstill after 72 hours, we hope is as short as 72 hours can be lifted for those outside the control area. So we're going to talk about what can we do today to prepare for a national movement standstill. And we can all harken back to COVID 2019 and the impact it had on people movement and on product movement due to a human health disease. So movement within that control area, once it's set up, will be by permit only. Why are they needed, and where can you find requirements? We're going to talk about that next. Well, one of the reasons why the permits are needed is for traceability purposes. We need to show transparency to others in the industry, our state animal health officials, and as well as the general public. They rely on the ag industry for their food, so how can we convey to them that we're doing everything possible to contain this animal disease? Another big important part is reporting to our trade partners. So we want to be able to have records to demonstrate outbreak control to be able to start those trade negotiation talks. There's two types of permits: operational, so things like feed and supplies that need to come in regardless. And then there's continuity of business. Not every farm will have a need to move animals, but many will. So those are considered continuity of business permits. The permits will be issued in the control area based on the risk of that movement. So where can you find the requirements for permitted movement? In the secure food supply plans for continuity of business. Each one of these plans basically provides a framework for permitting guidance. Participation in any of the secure food supply plans is completely voluntary for producers, but there's really some things that can be done now to help you protect your flock and also to think about business continuity opportunities. So at the end of each one of those documents is a permit guidance table, and this one is specifically for the movement of sheep, semen, and embryos. There's 5 big areas that each of the secure food supply plans addresses. This one in particular does not go into detail on wool. There's a separate document. So let's think about the animals, semen, and embryos. Traceability information is the first one you see up there. So a premises identification number. What's going to move, how much, and to where. Biosecurity measures that we talk about in the secure sheep and wool supply plan need to be in place and acceptable. That's the whole focus. How do you protect your flock from being exposed? Because only animals that have no evidence of infection, as described in point 5, have the eligibility for a movement permit. If you find that you've got trace back or trace forward, that record keeping, you might have been tied to an infected flock, you're then considered a contact premises. You won't be eligible for a permit until you can show that your animals are not infected. Suspect means that you've got animals with clinical signs or other reasons to believe that you have the infection. And then, of course, infected flocks. Infected, contact, and suspect are not going to be eligible for a continuity of business permit. The destination premises, just like today, needs to be willing to accept your products. These are the basics that are covered in the secure sheep and wool supply plan. And there are things people can do now to try and prepare. So go to securesheepwool.org and you'll find many of these resources. On the home page, if you want to learn more about foot and mouth disease, you can see an English or a Spanish handout. If you want to read this short little 9-page article about secure sheep and wool supply plan, it too is available. Or maybe you just want a quick 1-page handout. We've got those available in English and Spanish. We're really excited to continue on with the American Sheep Industry Association and thank them for funding us to continue to develop resources. I talked about contingency planning. This was a document that was developed last year, but again, COVID brought it to life. So what can happen if we need to kind of think forward about animal movements or maybe the financial side of things? This document walks through each piece of that. It's important when you first start thinking about contingency planning is making a list. What are all the things that need to come on or leave the operation? And some of those might be stopped, might require a permit if you find yourself in a control area. So there's an input-output document as well that can be used. I want to share with you a project that we did with the Secure Beef Supply Plan and National Cattlemen's Beef Association's Beef Quality Assurance, part of the Beef Checkoff. We tried to find synergies with that program. A lot of producers are doing record keeping already, and so why have to do one for one project and one for another? So just this past few months, we've been able to release what we call co-branded materials. So producers that are part of Beef Quality Assurance can also use the same materials to help them prepare for the Secure Beef Supply Plan. So this is just something I bring up with your group, that if maybe there's a way to kind of build on those synergies with the sheep quality assurance programs, it might be a good consideration. So another thing that can be done ahead of time is to make sure that you have a national premises ID, a PIN, which can be acquired from the Office of your State Animal Health Official, and is kind of the 911 or latitude, longitude GPS coordinates for where the animals are located. Maybe you already have one. You can make sure your information is up to date. So you can go just to your favorite search engine and type in USDA PIN, premises identification number, and this URL will show up. Now, we've learned as we worked on this that premises identification gets kind of confusing. So we are actually this year working on a premises identification handout that explains the differences, things that our friends in the sheep industry have dealt with for quite a while. Some of you hearken back to a legacy premises ID when this scrapie program was first rolled out. Others might have flock identification numbers or a location identifier. They serve very important but different purposes. So we've got a draft in review. There's just a picture of it here on your screen. Our colleagues at USDA are reading through that right now. And our goal is to just make frequently asked questions handout, nice little table for people to be able to refer to figure out, well, what do I need for what purpose? Because we don't want it to be confusing. COVID also taught us the important term called contact tracing. So contact tracing, again, record keeping. We want to be able to figure out that your farm is not, in contact with another farm that may have infected animals. What you see here, again, I mentioned the co-branding that happened with Beef Quality Assurance. Rest assured, we have all these same materials on the Secure Sheep site to try and keep records of these. So what can be done now? Start keeping records if you haven't. Even just pick one. Because it's so hard, as we've learned with COVID, to remember back how long you might have had contact with another human. Think about all the movements that come onto and off of your operation. Again, permits are not going to be issued to anybody that's got infected, suspect, or contact animal. So this year, we're working hard on developing additional outreach materials, and we're showing you a picture of the Secure Beef website where it has training materials over there in gray in the upper right-hand corner, and the outreach piece of it. We're working on videos on a variety of topics, things that can be used to promote what's happening with this program. Spanish resources, I've shown you a couple, and again, several of these will be translated into Spanish as well. And then some outreach articles. Maybe you do a newsletter. We'll have a variety of things to choose from. Biosecurity outreach. So it's really important that we promote what needs to happen to protect that flock, because again, we don't want them to be exposed, because then they won't be eligible for a movement permit. So we'll be adding to the Secure Sheep and Wool Supply Plan a section called signs and posters. So I show you the beef. That's kind of where we'll be headed by the end of September of 2021. So you'll see some signs and posters, and I'll show you that next. We've actually got these done. We'll build them up onto the website here in the next few months. Signage that can be posted. And again, it's just trying to let people know what are some of the requirements that you have to protect your flock. They're all branded with the Secure Sheep and Wool Supply logo, as well as our Center for Food Security and Public Health at Iowa State. Another thing, tangential to Secure Sheep and Wool, but so important for all of the secure food supply plans is you've maybe heard me talk about protecting the flock and building castle walls and the moat around your operation to try and make sure we're not letting in something that could expose our animals. So we worked really hard with the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship on a video, and this video is available on their YouTube site, and it talks about how do you set up a cleaning and disinfection station on a livestock premises. There's handouts that go along with the checklist of supplies that you'll need, all things that can be bought locally at farm supply stores, and also ways to set up the station itself and actually conduct the cleaning and disinfection. Not an easy task, so we are really glad that we've got a resource available for producers to use. Disease monitoring, it's really different in sheep. Sheep are not big showers of clinical signs of foot and mouth disease, but we are getting some pictures that you can see kind of captured here on the slide. Coming later this year, we'll have a handout that talks about what are some of the clinical signs in sheep, and these are coming to us from our USDA partners at Plum Island, the Foreign Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab off the coast of New York. All of these resources that I've talked about and that are coming will be available on the Secure Sheep and Wool Supply website. Again, securesheepwool.org. Want to tell you about an upcoming opportunity to get the word out even further. USDA hosts what they call training and exercise program webinars to make people more aware, not only within USDA, but all stakeholders. So join us on March 2nd, 2021 at 11 a.m. Eastern if you want to be part of that live webinar or all of the recordings. And there are dozens and dozens of excellent recordings available on different diseases, different response plans available at the USDA website you see pictured here. I want to say a big thank you to the American Sheep Industry Association for their continued funding of this project. It's been a pleasure to work with you. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you for your time.